Back to basics. Actually, not back to basics. I'm not playing with that card. But back to the basics of the channel. I'm running some Breya games here for your enjoyment. I've made one small change, which was just a reversion. I had Fragmentize. I went ahead and swapped it back out for Vandal Blast. What I've found is that although Fragmentize is a little bit easier to cast, and it is better when you're obviously dealing with something like a Sylvan Library. Most of the time, excuse me, in Commander, what you're dealing with is something along the lines of a Soul Ring or a Mana Crypt. And Vandal Blast does the job, so 9 out of 10 times that's what you're dealing with. Maybe 19 out of 20 times. I don't know what the ratio is, but it's so much the case that the cards are almost the same card. So the Fragmentize, like I said, is a smidge easier to cast. And of course, the flexibility to take out like an Oblivion Ring mid-game is pretty cool too. But Vandal Blast has the upside of occasionally just being almost a retroactive Mind Twist where you just completely blow out an opponent. For 5 mana, you destroy half their mana base, 3/4 of their mana base, something like that. Or you just kill all kinds of things that they've invested mana into. It's a major catch-up card, and I think the upside of that is probably too high, although I have so many disenchants in the deck that it's very, very rare that I would ever need to do something like that. But just having that option in my back pocket, as well as the fact that Vandal Blast will take out untargetable things, can occasionally be pretty darn good. And so I've decided to leave that in. However, the change I made when I was running the Fragmentize, which was to go up 1 white mana, I actually have the same amount of white and black mana due to the Urborg. I needed 1 more white. Which was to add this Audakar Waste and drop down to 2 islands. I like that change. I do kind of miss Landsax and everything. I do miss Scroll Rack, but I think that those days are past, unless they ban Necro, which they probably should, but I'd like to see Ad Nauseam go as well. But unless that happens, I'll continue to run the Urborg, and I continue to not need Tax Rack, most likely because the real card drawing power is right here. All right, so I'm going to run through some games, and these have been played over. I've been on vacation for a while, so I have been playing a little bit, but most of my time has been with my family. You'll see I've had a chance every couple days to get a few games in there, and I'm not filtering for results or anything like that. Last 7 days. So I also played some Legacy, and I've played a few other games as well. Dota Auto Chess has actually been very fun for me, but although I don't think there's an interest for that on this channel. But I do try to get in and play some Breya just because it is such a delight to play. Hopefully there's another set. I don't know when the next set drops, but it should be. I mean, I usually had a sense that it's sometime around this time of year. We usually see a new set, so I ought to probably go look around and see what's out there on places like MTG Salvation or wherever the latest spoilers are located, and start looking ahead and seeing if there's any cards that Breya will be able to use. But meanwhile, let's just take a look at some games. Now, none of these, if I remember correctly, were necessarily incredibly, in games where I'm, way behind and then come back from behind type of thing, unless you look at the early game. So I think quite a few of these involve my opponents drawing a Soul Ring or a Mana Crypt and do a good job of showing how to deal with that. At the same time, there's some games where I'm drawing those and do a great job of showing how to capitalize on getting those and put the game away quickly. So this first game is just like that. Against Padim here. Well, Burks BL playing Padim, and look at 4 mana on turn 1, but I've got almost the same as soon as I can get this Mana Vault online. Opponent gets their console down, does miss another land drop, which I don't. And I decide that the way I want to run this is I'm going to run Winter Orb to turn on my Opal, Spellseeker, and Palau, just because I don't want, even though it's not going to draw extra cards, I don't want my opponent's artifacts to be untargetable. And I believe right now I'm still not, at this point in the series, I was still on Fragmentize, not Vandal Blast. Anyways, my opponent continues to spin out Mana Rocks, and I let him go because I don't have a card drawing engine yet, and I'm a little bit light on card drawing power here. And although I would love to stop the Felwar Stone, I'm going to have to kind of deal with. I figured, well, my opponent would continue based on what they're doing, that they would continue hitting artifacts, and that I would need to focus on, rather than trying to stop the artifacts, I would need to focus on the cards that come with it that the artifacts enable. So I just chill here. Opponent does go for his Shackles. I am planning to Throne, so I try to remand the Shackles. My opponent Mana Drains, which allows me to Mana Leak. And for some reason, this is enough for my opponent to scoop. I think that's incredibly premature here. I'm going to put Shackles back in their hand. Now, I did make a slight tech play here. It was kind of nice, as it turns out. Maybe that's why. I doubt that's why they scoop. But anyway, so I remanded the Vedalken Shackles. My opponent Mana Drains the remand. I Mana Leaked the Shackles, not the Mana Drains. So my opponent was actually going to get 2 colorless in their second main phase to go with this 1 blue that they have untapped. But note that they had 3 blue and, well, 4 blue and 2 colorless available this turn and haven't done much with it. So it's my impression that that's going to be okay, and I don't mind giving them the 2 colorless. Also, I have Force of Will if I'm wrong, but obviously that would mind twist me, so I don't want to Force of Will. But the reason I did it this way is the Mana Leak, I'm figuring that the 2 colorless is going to be unhelpful to them, but the Vedalken Shackles would have been. And Mana Leaking it and getting it off the board permanently and losing the remand card draw seems like a better situation for me, because I really do want to activate the Throne, and I don't see myself doing that if Vedalken Shackles is on board. Plus, if I do get to my commander with the Cavern of Souls available, it shouldn't be too long. I can force it through uncounterably, and then sorry for the ons. My opponent will then be highly unlikely to ever have use for the Sword of Feast and Famine, so it kind of ensures that I've locked them out of the game, and maybe that's why they scoop, but I don't know. It does feel a little premature there. They were certainly favored due to the Winter Orb. I also think I could have played that a little bit better, but silly. It still got the win, I suppose. All right, so the next game is Archer Kuro playing Drana. And I've got a pretty fast start once things get cooking here. The opponent does the whole tap-out thing that I don't care for at all. And I get an early Throne activated. My opponent, of course, this encourages him to play his commander, which is exactly what I wanted since I had a solution in my hand. And now we're playing the game that I want to play, which is a lot of my opponent playing the Throne of the High City game, playing the Monarch game against Breya is just so incredibly difficult. Of course, I get an active Teferi to add insult to injury, as well as Mox Diamond there and Mox Opal to speed things along. And with that kind of mana acceleration and me drawing 3 cards per turn now, my opponent just packs it in. I think they were easily right to have done so. And here you see the Arctic Airway showed up instead of the basic island. And despite the fact that it deals damage to me sometimes, I think I would rather have had the Arctic Airways here. I think every time I've drawn it, I've always said to myself, I'm glad that's Arctic Airways instead of island. I think it's probably going to stay that way permanently is my guess, based on the way it feels. So anyway, I have to take a mulligan here. I'm facing Rurik Thar running by Blackagar Boltagon. And I don't have any kind of a crazy start, but I do have the potential for a Necro start. So that's kind of the game plan here. So in order to make that happen, well, first I take a peek and I see a Soul Ring, so I'm actually going to snag that Soul Ring. And that kind of changes what I tutor for, because I go get Crucible here. I was planning to go get Urborg and then just slam a Necro. But I figure I can wait one more turn, pick up the guaranteed land drops off the Crucible there. And because I have Necro, I actually focus more on mana development, because I won't need to worry about card advantage, especially with Necro. I am Crucible, but just with Necro. primarily. So I fetch a Lotus instead. The thing that Necro wants more than anything is just tons and tons of mana to go with all those cards. All right, so my opponent gets their commander down, but I read it carefully. It's a 6/6 that has to attack. So my opponent then plays Elvish Piper. So I just play Breya and put 4 in front of it, sack 2 flyers, make them a 2/2, and kill the commander off and keep mine. So Breya kills the commander with just 2 flyers, as it does to a lot of the smaller commanders. I go ahead and clear out most of my opponent's cards and get rid of their Elvish Piper, and then draw some more cards and pass. It runs out Rurik Thar again, so I am going to sack the map here, as well as Breya, to kill their... Alright, and it looks like we have a bugged game. So I kill their mana producer, and then on the next turn I go ahead and play Breya under the... knowing full well that my opponent has to make the same exact play. They have to run their Rurik Thar due to the rules on it into Breya, which I then block with all the 2 flyers in the Breya, sack the 2 flyers, make this a 2/2, kill it. And that actually happens, I think, 2 more times. My opponent just plays their commander, runs it dead first into Breya, and it dies. Meanwhile, I sack 2 flyers to kill the commander, and then Breya plus a random mana rock to kill one of their mana guys, making it even harder for their commander to come back down. So it happens a couple more times, but I mean, it's just a hopeless situation where my opponent has to suicide their commander over and over into mine. Just a bad matchup for them. So we move on. Unfortunately, bugged games, can't do much about that. And I've got this game against the Daniel running Trotta. I think the Daniel, as far as I know, has been running a Trotta for quite a while. I recognize the name. Excuse me, from Brian's channel, actually. And I think I've played the Daniel a few times, but as well, that seems to be a memorable name. I've got a wonderful start here. Using Imperial Seal, I'm able to go get workshops so that I can get that Lotus into play. Remand my opponent's 4 drop off an Ancient Tomb there. So they've got the Daniel has also got a pretty fast start, but I do that, and then playing a Throne of the High City and activating Teferi seems to be enough for my opponent. And the Daniel scoops it up. At this point, I'm drawing 2 cards per turn, threatening to draw 3 with Throne. And as soon as the Daniel does not know this, but as soon as I get next turn rolls around, I get to run out Adhikar, Opal, Karn, activate Karn to turn on the Opal, sack this, and then from there I'm drawing 4 cards per turn, I think it is. 1 from Throne. I mean, it won't be long. It'll be 1 from Throne, 1 from the draw phase, 1 from Teferi, and 1 from Karn. Yeah, 4 cards per turn. More than enough to win a game. My opponent packs it in. So that was on the 14th. That was the first game of the 14th. So the second game was Myrdral Tribe here. So we'll jump into that. My opponent's playing Teza Karlov. And you can see I have swapped to Vandal Blast at this point. My opponent's got an insane start now. This was really cool, actually. I'm going to pause. Because he says, "Hi, good luck." I say, "Thank you, too." He says, "Sorry for the start, kind of ridiculous." I say, "Never apologize for a well-built deck." He says, "Some people get bent out of shape so easily online." I said, "No worries, I love being forced out of my game." And I say, if you agree, you might like my channel. He says he'll check it out. So hopefully, if you have checked out the channel, if you're watching this video in particular, hopefully you enjoy the playback from the other side. But I thought it was really neat, first of all, that my opponent recognized how insane their start is, and that some people would be bent out of shape by it. But more importantly, it was just an easy person to get along with. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, these are the games we look forward to. So I said that there weren't a lot of games where I was starting out on the back foot, or where I was in deep trouble and then, coming back from behind. Technically, though, if you look at that turn 1, you could probably chalk this one up to that, although the first game in the series was similar, right? My opponent had 4 mana on turn 1, mono blue, and here they have 4 mana and a Dark Confidant on turn 1 in blue and black-white. But I did have, fortunately, an Ancient Tomb, which allowed me to Toxic Deluge away the Confidant before I get any cards. A little bit earlier than what I would have liked, but I then get to run out of Crucible, sack a land, and VB the Mana Crypt off the board, which is nice. Opponent gets a couple of different threats out. Teysa Karlov, their commander, as well as Teysa Orzhov Scion. So if they get a third creature into play, I'm in big trouble. So with that, I go ahead and Mind Twist here, taking a ton of damage. Remember, I'm using Ancient Tomb over and over, so while my plays look really good, the amount of damage I'm taking is not. I take even more here. Is this another bugged game? Well, it appears it is. That's unfortunate. But what happened here was I played Breya, and then I used Ancient Tomb. My opponent actually top-decked a creature that would have given them the third white creature, allowing them to use Teysa. And, of course, the dying trigger may have triggered. I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, the whenever another black creature dies would have triggered off of the other Teysa. However, thanks to Ancient Tomb, I played Breya, and then I sack and take this Teysa off the board before the third creature can come down, so removing his exile power. And then from there, I'm able to Seal of Cleansing away the Signet, and I don't think I had dove in here. This actually is probably why it's bugging out, but I did very quickly get control. I had control of the board. Very low life total, but I think at some point I find a Stoneforge and I go get Jitte. And then Jitte not only locks the board down, but also refreshes my life very quickly, along with Breya activation. I think I use a single Breya activation at some point in that game, as well as some Jitte tokens. Because I have to keep pounding on my Ancient Tomb so heavily. In fact, I'm certain that I dropped down to like 3 life or something. So here's a game against Murdrall Tribe. Or no, MT 1993, pardon me. And running Nekuzar, and I've got an insane start. But I hide the start early. I just get the shop out so that it's protected from Strip Mine. Use it to play Crucible. It does put the Crucible at risk a little bit, but I have to put something at risk. So I go that route, and I run out Gilded Lotus, and I wait to see if they've got a counter, and no counter is forthcoming. And with that, I get to play a protected Breya, an uncounterable Breya off of Cavern of Souls. And this start is just nuts. And since I haven't seen a lot, but I'm not willing to. The last 2 cards in my hand are a 1/2 punch. I can lead with either one of them and then follow with the other one if my opponent has removal or a counter. So I'm going to hide those for now, and I just run out Shackles, which is not useful right here. But it was mostly bait. It's just a check to see if my opponent had an answer or not. And when they tap out, though, to deal with Breya, or mostly tap out, when they tap 3 mana for Deluge, leaving only 1 up, I decide I'm going to play the Orb. If this is a spell Snare, I can't do anything about it, but if it's anything else, I can. Meanwhile, nothing happens, so I send out Teferi and draw an extra card. I think I actually have the order reversed, but the point is I get to play my 1/2 punch, and that is a knockout. My opponent scoops. But that was just such an insane start. It was absolutely a fun one to play. Like I said, some of these games are just how do you take advantage of fast starts, and that's certainly one way to do it. So the second game against them, the MT 1993 just scooped, joined the game, and decided they didn't want to play against Breya or against me, and scooped. So I played a couple more for the 14th. Next one was against Ultra Cold 99, and then I had a few good games today. So I don't remember. That's about as far as I remember from a while back, so we'll see what the rest holds. Opponent's got Arcades the Strategist, but I've got an early fast start. Unfortunately, it stalls a little bit because I don't have all the colors that I need. So I actually end up playing a Snapcaster just so that I can equip Sword on it. And then here I decide I'm going to go get Tez into Soul Ring, Smash into Dovin, into Flyer, and holy smokes, look at that. Look at that. Acceleration is so pretty, right? So opponent gets their commander down. I fetch a Mox Opal Tez for 0, using it to play Breya, and then send in my Snapcaster, untap my lands, play a Weathered Wayfarer, move my sword over, make another flyer and pass. Opponent then goes for a wall of Tangle Cord. Now their commander is Arcades, the strategist. I was going to say Sabath, which will let them draw a card whenever they play a defender, and they can attack with defender creatures. I think each creature with defender signs combat equal to its toughness and can attack. Yeah. So what would have happened is, so by sacking and killing this in response, well, I started to. It's a 3/5. I had to shrink it once, and then I was going to have to shrink it a second time. But my opponent was going to get to draw a card, and then they've got a very expensive commander that they have to replay. Well, 6, I suppose, but expensive for them in the board position that they're in. Now, it was a little bit painful to do that because right here, sacking 4 flyers with Dovin is rough because I could have, plussed them up and then ultimated the next turn, and this sets me back a turn. But I'm so far ahead that it's enough to win anyway, and I think my opponent realizes that. Also, what I could do is I could plus up Dovin and get in with as much as I was able to, and then minus Tezzeret and go get Clamp, and then just draw multiple cards off both Snapcaster, Weathered Wayfarer. That's 4 cards right there. And assuming I'm going to sack the 2 Thopters here, I still would have had another 2 cards I could pull off this. So next turn, I would have 7 cards in hand. Now, one thing I will say, if you do use both Dovin and Breya, of course, is that the Breya tokens flyers are blue and the Dovin tokens are colorless. They're both Thopters. So I recommend if you have to sack, that you sack the blue creatures first, because then your colorless creatures can block a Sword of Fire and Ice if you need to, and that will come up occasionally. So just something to keep in mind. So here's one of those occasions where I jump back in a second game to see if my opponent wants to try for a 2 out of 3. Oh, and I guess they didn't. All right, I didn't remember that that was the same as the MT 1993. Maybe I had them confused. Let me check the second game against MT here. Yep, same thing. Okay. So I try to give my opponents the opportunity to run a second game, but a lot of times they don't want to, and that's what you get. But at least I've tried. So last game for the 14th was against ICU. Not the hospital ward apparently, but rather somebody looking at me. So anyway, they've got an interesting start here. First turn Mystic, second turn Priest. So this is another fast start. It's just disguised in the form of creatures. And I've got a fairly slow start, and then throw a Soul Ring on top of it. So hell of an early game. Freyalise is their commander, means I'm not going to easily be able to keep up either, because I can't just use artifacts necessarily, unless I do like I did here and attack Fade and steal their Soul Ring. And then I've got to, of course, deal with... I then tutor up a Toxic Deluge and clear their board, and put a second artifact in play for them to target. Now, my opponent chooses not to kill either one. They actually make an elf, and I think that was a huge mistake. But on the other hand, I mean, my opponent's was all in on the alternate mana sources, and I cleared all of it. So they have to use their commander now as an alternate mana source to try to keep up. It's just not going to work against an active Necro. I also happen to draw a Skull Clamp there, so I get 7 cards of Necro, plus I've got a Clamp. Most likely in this game I won't be doing a lot of clamping since Necro does the work. I'll sack the Thopters. Oh, excuse me. Sack the Thopters to deal 3 to the commander if they -2, targeting anything. I'll sack. Most likely they would target, I don't know, my Breya or my Gilded Lotus, and I would sack whichever one they targeted +1 Thopter to kill the commander. And at that point, they're done. If they don't make it, then I assume they would pump up the Tree Speaker, but I could replay Breya even without a Soul Ring or the Lotus, and then kill the Tree Speaker right away. And realizing that, they scoop. But remember, as dominant as this position was, my opponent's start was insane, and mine was not. It's just that the deck has the tools. Excuse me. it has the tools to deal with these crazy starts, and that, I think, is the most important thing in the format. You've got to be able to give as good as you get, and you've got to be able to deal with it when your opponent does the same. All right, so we play our second game. I mulligan a hand that was probably pretty keepable, but I end up with this slightly awkward hand. It's got fast mana, but it's temporary mana, and it doesn't have anything to invest it into, and you want to push Mana Vault into something that's going to give you a return, considering you're losing a card once you use it. But I think because of the Force of Will and the copy artifact, hoping that my opponent was going to run out their Soaring, and I could copy and vindicate it, which of course doesn't happen. So now I've got to figure out how I'm going to get into this game. So I decide what I'm going to do is vindicate their Elder and just Orb, and buy some time. My opponent does. I mean, Orb against Elves is pretty loose, but at the same time, my opponent's draw is not indicating that they've got anything good going on. And just preordained under an Orb to hit a land drop, which leaves me with the exact same amount of mana I had before, but it gives me knowledge of the top of my deck. My opponent goes for an Oracle here, which totally taps him out under the Orb and is fantastic. So I Force the Will with a copy artifact, since I haven't seen any Soul Rings anywhere. And decide I'm just going to run out Breya and start a clock. This way, so my opponent's under a clock. They're discouraged from playing Elves, which would allow them to work around the Orb, and as opposed to sitting on a Cryptic that might not get used. And if I can get to 4 mana, I can Cryptic the Orb back to my hand if I want to. So make a counter, bounce the Orb, get all my mana back. It's an option. So with that in mind, when I draw Ponder, I do not play it. However, I draw a Stoneforge here, which is going to be very big. Now, my opponent's coming up on 5 mana, and with Freyalise in the command zone, I'm thinking that's probably the play they're going to make here, and they do. So I allow them to play it, and they go to destroy my Breya, which I thought they would kill the Winter Orb, which I don't understand that one at all. And then, so the plan was, so they tricked me a little bit. Anyway, but it didn't matter. The plan was, I figured, let them have the Breya, don't counter it. Let them target the Orb, bounce the Orb and draw a card to effectively counter the Freyalise, which I'll then attack and kill. But that would give me all my mana back. Better than countering the thing and not getting all my mana back. I could counter and bounce the Orb, but then I don't get the card. By doing it the other way, I get an extra card out of it. So when my opponent target Breya, I was a little bit surprised, but I decided, you know what, I'm just going to roll with that. I'll just stick with the same plan. So I bounce the Orb and draw a card, and at this point my opponent scoops. Now, of course, next turn, if they didn't give up, I get to Stoneforge, but I need to hit a land. In order to Stoneforge, go get Sword of Feast and Famine, play it, equip it, and swing, untap, play Winter Orb, ponder, and pass. One Thopter kills Freya, the other one untaps all my lands and deals 3 to my opponent. So that's the goal, but I don't know if I would have hit a land or not, and I guess we'll never know since my opponent scooped. So, then I played 4 games today, and the first one was against 20 max skills. And 20 max skills has the Gitrog monster as their commander. And I've got an okay start. It's good if my opponent leads off like a mana elf. Not good when my opponent goes land Crypt Crucible. The leak here is alright. Hopefully my opponent doesn't find a crop rotation or something along those lines. Instead they've got a Kazandu Tuskcolor, which hopefully you know is not a good card for this format. It is way too slow. Anyway, my opponent pluses it up though, so I'm going to just snag it and play a land, and I think we are super bugged territory. Well, that's unfortunate. I didn't review this game, but I know I didn't draw an impulse there. This was actually Duretti that I was playing. So I attack for 1, I play Duretti, I make it Dork, my opponent plays the Gitrog monster. I actually used Duretti to kill and continues to recur lands from the graveyard. I used Duretti to kill the Gitrog, and then sit on... and then Merchant Scroll for mana drain. Opponent then plays Underworld Dreams for some reason, which I then mana drain. And I use the mana drain mana to, on my turn, play Throne of the High City and pump it into the throne so that I can start drawing 2 cards per turn. I make token with the ready, and I think then shortly after that I kill the Crucible, leaving him with the Crypt still. Opponent tries to run out Gitrog, I leak it. And then once I'm in that 2 cards per turn mode, very quickly kind of take over the game. I never did find a way to produce green mana. I never found a Mox Diamond or a City Brass or something so that I could, or a Felwar Stone, so I could use my opponent's Kazandu Tuskcaller. But eventually I think, I think I copy Artifact, the Betelkin Shackles. The ready finally gets the Mana Crypt off the board. My opponent's Gitrog is out of reach in mana cost, and at that point, and I'm drawing like 2 or 3 cards per turn. My opponent scoops. So sorry I couldn't show you, but yeah, another fast start from my opponents. All right, so I've got this game 1 and game 2 against Leonidas CLG. Opponent did decide to play both games. We had a brief chat about my philosophy of letting him try twice, but in these 2 games, I'm the one with the fast start. So insanely, savagely fast, as it turns out. So my opponent does go first. I'm going to pause. Their commander is Sigarda, Host of Herons. And I draw Mana Crypt off the top. So I get to go Land Crypt DT. And then I play Skull Clamp to try to hide what I actually tutored for, make it look like a tutor for the Clamp, which would make sense with my commander, and hopefully my opponent's buying it. On the off chance they've got removal, I don't want to force with Jace. So if they do have artifact removal, there's a small chance I just could talk them into killing the Clamp. Opponent did not have removal, however, so fine by me. I get to run out of Jace, and I top deck Dovin, which is totally crazy when you look at the fact that I also have a Skull Clamp, right? So I Jace so that I have a preordained Forcewith. Opponent plays Sterling Grove. I'm certainly not going to counter Sterling Grove under normal conditions. And I'm going to go ahead and draw some more cards here. I think we're bugging out, or maybe we're not. I guess I was putting the Soul Ring on top, then I was going to make a dork. I was going to clamp it. I would have exactly 1 mana left over from the Underground Sea, and then I would play the Soul Ring and use the Soul Ring to play the Talisman, and the Talisman I could preordain with and still have Force of Will using Impulse. So that was the play this turn. But before we get any farther, my opponent says, yeah, he recognizes double Planeswalkers, way too much mana. Opponent just scoops. And we move into game 2, where my opponent is able to exact his vengeance, but unfortunately for Leonidas, this is a little bit goofy, but I have the exact same start, or just about. I misplay it a little bit, so I fabricate here. So I don't know if it's misplay, but so I could have gone with Talisman there. The thing is, that gives me a turn 2 Jace, but if my opponent kills the Crypt, then I am stuck with a land and a Talisman, and I can't cast Fabricate, and it's pretty bad. By going this way, if my opponent does kill the Crypt and I miss a land drop, I can still play Soul Ring Talisman and follow up with a Jace. And so I decide I like this better because even though it delays Jace if I don't find a land, it gives me more of a it gives me more resiliency in the face of disruption. So that's I decided to play it a little bit safe. So I do tutor up the Soul Ring first. Run it out here. Unfortunately, no land, no Mox, whatever. So we'll just run out a Jitte. And hopefully my opponent doesn't do anything too nasty. What he does do is play a Stoneforge for a Sword of Feast and Famine, which I applaud because how often do you see somebody playing Sword of Feast and Famine? That's pretty cool. I totally think that that's a great card, and it's neat to see someone else use it. Normally you see the same handful of equipment, and that one's not usually on the list, funny enough. Anyway, here I just play Winter Orb, even though it's only going to hit 1 land from my opponent because I drew Strip Mine for the turn, and then run out Chase. So I'm actually not going to draw cards here. What I'm going to do is bounce Stoneforge and pass. My opponent will only be able to untap 1 land, which then gets stripped. Kind of like a mini Time Walk if my opponent just plays land and says go. And then from there, I've got active Jace, strip mine's gone, but all this is working on my favor. And as soon as I find a black mana source, I can mind twist my opponent's hand. And that is it. Opponent has to deal with a Mana Crypt Jace draw twice and does not want to play anymore. So Royal 1986 jumps into the last game for the video and is playing a Balin Wandering Knight. I have not seen this one before. It's an equipment-focused commander. And I lead off with a fair hand, a little bit slower. I've got a early map, but it has Toxic Deluge, which is really nice to see. And my opponent does get a Relic Seeker here. So I could deluge it off the board, but as soon as I get my commander down, I'm going to be able to just, my opponent's going to get some equipment here, but I get my commander down, then what will they do with it? Because it'll be very hard for them to actually stick a creature. So I decide I'm going to go ahead and let him do that. My opponent fetches up a Hero's Blade, which is pretty good, but it's definitely not one of the big four. And then plays a Banisher Priest, and then I'm going to pause for a sec. I let the Priest resolve. It targets Breya. I right-click on Breya, and I choose Exile, not Command Zone. And then I let the Priest finish resolving, and Breya gets removed. See, Exile, not Command Zone. And then, is that? Yeah. And then Priest removes it from the game. And of course, as you are watching, you know exactly why that is. So I'm going to jump here because it's no point in losing life when the Thopters are going to die. I'm not going to be able to attack because I charge a Relic and I don't want to waste the mana. So I miss a point of damage here, but not a point of damage I could save. Clear the board, get Breya back. Pretty bad news for my opponent. So they go for a Return to Dust, which I then mana drain, charge, and tutor. With 5 cards in my opponent's hand, let's make that 0. So off the Relic, I get black mana. I tap the Wasteland for the rest. Mind twist my opponent's hand, so no more equipment to worry about there. And now I can Cryptic Command and Coalition Relic. Of course, I'm not going to Cryptic Command something that I don't need to counter, so I'll just charge here. And I was about to Thopter away the commander, but my opponent realizes that's going to happen. Scoops, and that is it. I could have sacked here, and maybe I would have thought about sacking Breya Thopter, only because I could then replay Breya and get more Thopters and deal with the commander a second time. But I don't really like that because I would have to tap out. I wouldn't have Cryptic Command up next turn. And my opponent would play a Dust for Dust to Dust or Return to Dust. So they know what they're doing enough that anything could happen. And that could result in a bad board state for me. So I would have just sacked the Thopters here, smash with Breya, and sat on the Cryptic Command. And if I had to, then I would Cryptic Command the commander. I don't like doing that. I like killing it and saving Cryptic for cards that come off the deck. But I think here would have been fine. So, and that is it. So hopefully you enjoyed those games. Lots of games where, as you can see, the opponent's most important thing, the point of this video that I wanted to drive home was dealing with fast starts is very important in this format, and being able to take advantage of them is also important. And you got to see quite a few examples of this deck doing both things, and hopefully you enjoyed it. I think, to be honest, that's part of what, in my opinion, makes the format so much fun, is that you've got some variation like that, these really crazy beginnings, but you can deal with them because, unlike what I've noticed about Legacy is that when my opponent gets a fast start in Legacy, I'm dead. You know, it's reanimate, Grizzlebrand, kill you on turn 1, and there's nothing I can do about it. Even with Force of Will, like my first, they reveal the card that says your first spell is going to cost 1 extra mana, unmask you, Dark Ritual, Entomb, Reanimate, and that's it. Like, there's 0 chance of playing the game. it goes from being a fast start to being a dead player, and stuff like that to me is not fun. But a format where you can have really fast starts that don't necessarily win the game, that is a lot of fun. It actually reminds me of old school more than anything, because in old school, sometimes you draw your Black Lotus and you use it to sneak a Jam Day Tome out against a Mana Drain deck, but it doesn't even start doing anything until you get 4 other, total mana sources in play, and then you start drawing cards, which means versus, like, say, Vintage now, where you draw your Lotus and you just, use it to play your Yawgmoth's Will and then your Tendrils and kill your opponent. So very different philosophies, I think, and I love where the format is at right now. Hopefully you do too. So anyway, that's all I've got. Hopefully I'll do some more Breya, I expect. So keep an eye out for that. But the next few days I'll be traveling home, so it might be a little bit before I get to it. So thank you very much for your patience. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.